Hi, the purpose of this video is to talk about this stuff, ACF50, or to give it its full name, Anti-Corrosion Formula 50. Now this was developed for the aerospace industry, so it's a high quality product. It's non-toxic and it's suitable for spraying basically everywhere on your scooter. But is that the right thing to do? If you have a look on YouTube, you'll see that there are several videos, probably more than I've watched, of motorcyclists who, after covering their tyres, because this is a lubricant so you don't want it on your brakes, they get a compressor and a spray gun and they spray the whole bike with ACF50. And I've no doubt if you wanted the most corrosion protection, that would be the way to do it. Excuse me. However, I don't want that, and the reason I don't want it is because this leaves a sticky residue and it will pick up road dirt, and you have to recover with this every 12 to 18 months, which means cleaning off what you've already put on. Now there is a motorbiker on YouTube that states that it took him 2.5 days and he still hasn't cleaned it all off. Quite frankly, that's not for me. So to see what is for me, I've made this video. Well, I've taken 2 nails and I've coated the one on the right in ACF50. It's Tuesday morning, about 10:30, and I'm going to put these out in the weather, and it hasn't been good weather, and I'm going to leave them till around about Friday and see if there's any difference in them. One of the first things I'm going to say is, as for the hole, I'm not going to use the actual spray can itself to spray into the bike, because that's very messy. I'm going to use a microfiber cloth and I'm going to spray the ACF50 onto that, and I'm going to wipe it onto the vulnerable areas. Now, I consider these tanks to be highly vulnerable because they get rubbed by the bolts when you're taking your panels on and off, and I think that's possibly a point where paint that's been knocked off could start to rust. So I'm putting a nice even coat on there, make sure that's on nice and even, and then I'm going to spray some into the cap like this, and using a cotton bud I'm going to get into this little joint here, and the reason for that is there's a rubber sat on there from the panel and it's going to hold water of some type. So I'm going to come around that with a cotton bud, make sure that I get a nice even spread of ACF50 on there, and don't worry about it going elsewhere because it wipes off quite easily. And I'm going to get a line of covering in there. Now I will cover all that little flange that's sticking up, and then when you've got that in place, you can just take your cloth and wipe the areas where you don't want it to be, like that. So, but I'll probably do that after I've got the panel back on and I can see where the overrun is. Now let's have a look at the engine. Now, looking at this side of the engine, some of the most likely points to pick up rust will be these nice shiny bolts, and I'm going to make sure that I give those a liberal coating to stop them rusting. So I'm going to go around all of those. Also the top of the petrol tank here around the edge, because I can see water would sit in that, and that would cause a problem. So just getting a nice coat on there, and you may not be able to see it on the video, but that puts a film on there, which you can give a second coat on, leave it a while, maybe till tomorrow, and give it a second coat. But the next thing I want to talk to you about are these shockers. So what I've done here is I've put a cloth behind the suspension here, and I am going to spray into the suspension. These springs are coated and they'll rub against each other, plus I want to keep that chrome clean as well. So I'm going to more or less go right round that with the actual can itself. Now be very careful not to get this onto your brakes, and that's what the cloth's about. Now I'm going to make sure that I cover that front and back, give that time to dry off. It's very much a film, and as you're working with it you'll see it's on the material. And the other area I'm going to spray up into is going to be the inside of the mudguard here and the frame itself. Now again, be careful to avoid your brakes. That it is quite a messy stuff this, but as I say, you won't be able to see it when you're out and about, and it should give some protection. Now don't put it on your exhaust because it will just burn off with the heat. The other thing it does do is it gives a nice shine to plastics, and the other purpose for this is it waterproofs your electrical system. Now I'm not advocating spraying it everywhere, but if you've got some areas where you feel that the electrics are prone to moisture, you can put this on it. So I'm going to put the ACF50 on the top of this. Well, it's for the brake lines, but I can see that that will be quite a vulnerable area. And I'm going to take my time this afternoon, and I'm going to go around all of those nuts and bolts on either side, and this should all clean off next year for a second coating. I'm going to do all of the suspension, and I'm going to do the front suspension, again taking great care that you don't get that actually on any brake components. But also with the aerosol, I'm going to come up under the mudguard there and onto the forks. This might help with problems with bearings, but it's easy to get at, you won't be able to see it. Now when you spray this on using the aerosol, you will get it dripping down, etc., but it's easy enough to clean up afterwards, and once it's on the surface it should give you some protection for the rest of the year, and certainly through the winter. I think the best protection for metal is the paint itself, and I have a little touch-up brush that any little chips I always dab on to make sure that they don't go rusty. Make sure your bike's very clean before you start, and just work your way around the whole bike, and that should give you some protection against rust. Well, it's now Friday, about 2:30, so a fraction over 3 days out in the weather. Quite a lot of which has been wet, and clearly the nail on the left with no ACF50 on it is picking up a considerable amount of rust, and the one on the right, although there are a couple of spots there, I think that may be my poor coverage rather than any fault with the ACF50 itself. What it does demonstrate is that A, metal will rust very quickly out in the weather, and B, that you're better off with some protection than none at all.